painters are much better than photographers in many areas. And painters are better in composition, for instance. They do easier to find compositions as well. And painters are even masters in telling a story with the image. And there are reasons why they are better, of course. And I have to say, all that is possible to implement into our photography. And this could help you to bring your photos even to world class. Hi my friends, very nice to see you. It is so interesting. You know, I engage already my whole life with paintings, with compositions of paintings. And just quickly, for those who are new to my channel, I'm a landscape photographer and I come from a quite art history family. Yeah, my grandfather, for instance, he was a homeland painter and he painted a lot of portraits and landscapes, and he was also a professor in art. And this is why I engaged with composition long before I took my first photograph as a boy with 12 years. And from there on, it took me multiple years to understand that composition in painting is exactly the same as for photography. And now I think it took me, quite 30 years to understand that there are anyway so big differences between painters and photographers from the point of view of their approach when it comes down to create a masterpiece. And there are really multiple things photographers can learn from painters. And I would say, let's dive in right now. Well, first of all, the mindset is totally different. I talked with a painter recently and I asked him what he thinks, what is the difference between painting and photography. And that's really interesting. He said, and that's the opinion of a painter, obviously, he said photography is the instinctive reaction to an event, anything that happens. And painting instead is a thoughtful process of creating a story and the composition. And this is so interesting because the way he described painting is exactly how I would describe fine art photography actually. Again, a thoughtful process of creating a story and composition. And they have a different approach, and this makes painters also better in finding compositions. Let me give you an example. I've been out for a little hike some time ago with my wife, and close to the parking lot we saw two girls. They have started to paint, and they had so much fun. And we looked a bit over their shoulders before we started our hiking tour, and when we came back later, around 4 hours later, something like that, they were still standing there and working on their painting. 4 hours! That's a quite long exposure time, isn't it? And the thing is, the light got totally different within that long time span of 4 hours, obviously. The light changed everything in their composition. So before they started to paint, they had already to consider how the scene would change while their painting process. Because, try to expose a photograph for 4 hours. So when a painter starts to paint a landscape scene on the top of a canvas, which is often the case for landscapes by the way, without considering the changing light, the painting would have a totally other mood at the bottom area in the end. And I guess this would not look good. So to get rid of this issue, a painter has to be good at his imagination skills. And imagination is really key here, and especially landscape painters are good at imagination. And this is the reason why they do so much easier with finding compositions out in the field. When you enter an area and there is the best composition in front of you humans have ever seen, with dull light, it is so easy to oversee even a masterpiece, isn't it? But when you are good with imagination, how a scene would look through different light and weather situations. You can come back later and you have the chance to go home with a masterpiece in your bag. Imagination is a skill you can improve quite easily. Whenever you are out in nature and you look at any nature scene, just ask yourself, how would the scene look through different light and weather situations? And I want to be honest here with you, it is easy to, but it is nothing that will come overnight. But with each time you do that, you will get better. And after a while, you will see compositions wherever you look. So improve your imagination skills and get better in finding compositions. before we will talk about why painters are masters in storytelling, let's have a look which techniques painters use to get more powerful images. Well, photographers tend trying to get out the best possible image quality, and yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I just think that we maybe focus a tiny bit too much on that. Just think, what is important for you when you buy a new lens? Honestly, it should be as sharp as possible, right? But you can get pin-sharp photographs with each lens, also with cheap lenses. And I made already a video about that, by the way. I will link it up here for you. Or just think about megapixels. We try to lose as few megapixels as possible. Photographers are used to, and I have to put my own hands up here, we are used to do pixel peeping. Now, have you ever looked at an oil painting? So this oil painting here, for instance, was painted by my grandfather. I hope you can see this here. And yeah, he put a lot of effort into this one. But now let's look closer. What happens? We don't really see relevant details anymore. At a cluster of a few centimeters, we just can recognize rough brush strokes. And now let's imagine how small the pixel is of a 60 megapixels camera compared to those big brush strokes. Even the pixels of just a 24 megapixels camera is quite small compared with the big details of an oil painting, right? So I think that there is nothing bad with trying to get photos as sharp as possible with as little ISO noise as possible, with as many megapixels as possible too. I just think we pay a bit too much attention to that. When we break it down, there is just a minimum of image quality we should try to achieve, but I think that we put too much time and energy on quality levels, which are simply not necessary. And now painters instead even use this lack of resolution, if you want, to their advantage. Let's have a look at this painting here, for instance. It is an aquarelle, also painted by my grandfather. And we see that he has also considered a lot of details here at the windows or at the roof of the hut back there. Also the shadows on the trees and so on. But here in the foreground, the road, we don't have any details here. And I think a higher resolution, yeah, if we want to call it like that, a higher resolution here in the foreground road would even distract from the essence of this painting, the house back there. It would catch our eyes here in the foreground, which is not an important area in this composition, so sharpness is definitely not good here in the foreground. And here another example, this time from a landscape scene. I like this painting. It hangs in the kitchen of my parents' house, and this already for decades. If we would photograph a scene like that, the middle in the foreground could easily lead to empty space. You know, we want to avoid empty space because it doesn't add anything to the composition. It is distracting. And in the worst case, the viewer's eyes get even misled out of the frame. A composition like that is quite difficult to photograph. I mean, you can take a snapshot of everything, of course, but we're talking about fine art photography here. So painters are good with simplifying a scene, with simplifying a composition. They can achieve that by their painting technique to get unimportant areas in the composition a bit more abstract. But we can't do this, of course, in photography. We have to use other techniques. Just a quick example. I took a photo in Tuscany this year where I also took poor middle in the foreground, same as with the painting I showed you before. And quite interesting here, at noon the sun was high obviously, and this fact simplified the scene by fewer micro contrasts. This is why it was possible for me to take more of this foreground middle into my frame. But in the evening, yeah, I returned there in the evening, the light came more from the right. Yeah, it was side light from the right, and this led more to amazing micro contrasts. And the sunset image looks sharper through, which is given due to the side light, due to the high micro contrasts. But this is why I needed to take less of the foreground middle into my frame. More details, more sharpness in the foreground, yeah, would simply be bad for this composition. It would distract the viewer, it would maybe mislead him. And it's really interesting what photographers can learn from painters, isn't it? But there's even much more, and before I will tell you why painters are better in composition itself, my friends, if you like this video, please consider to give me a thumb up. It helps me, it helps the algorithm, and it helps also other photographers out there to find this video better on YouTube. Thank you therefore. There's something really important we can learn from painters. Have you ever observed a painter when he goes into setup? I mean, if you want to call it like that. However, one of the things painters do is they mix colors on their palettes. Now, in photography, we don't have to do something like that, of course. In photography, the colors are already there, right? We just have to take the shot, actually. So, colors is nothing we should care about, right? But yeah, I mean, when we boil it down, everything is already there. Also, the whole composition. It is like, yeah, with a sculpture, for instance. For him, the statue is also already there. He just has to take away the material which doesn't belong to the figure. And in painting, and also in photography, the composition is also already there. And also the colors are already there. But the thing is, painters can't use all the colors which exist in reality in a scene. And this is simply not possible. They just choose the most important colors of a scene and they mix them on their palettes. And this reduction of colors, if you want, leads to a more abstract appearance on the one hand, but on the other hand, it simplifies the scene, it simplifies the composition, and exactly that can lead to a more powerful image. So what we can do in photography is, and again, we are talking about fine art photography here, not about capturing reality or snapshots or something like that. So what we can do is we can also simplify our photographs by color. There will definitely come an own video about color here on my channel. Just quickly, what I tend to do is in post-processing, I decrease the saturation of my photos and then I simply increase the colors or the saturation of the colors I want to use in my image. And when I'm doing that, I also have a kind of a palette in my mind. I don't really mix colors or so, but I really choose colors. I shift them a tiny bit to emphasize the mood I want to convey. And this can lead into really powerful images, also in photography. Let me give you a quick example. In this image here, for instance, I decided for a complementary color system. I have green as my key color and orange as my complementary color, which is my highlight color in this case. And this is how I brought the foliage up there on the tree popping out even more. And the scene gets more simple and the entire image stronger. But there exist many more color systems than just a complementary color, but there will come an own video about that. I mentioned my grandfather. He was a painter, but he was also an art professor. He taught his students, for instance, to engage deeply with the things they want to paint. And so good portrait painters, for instance, study quite long how the anatomy of humans looks, how the behavior of all the muscles works together when they are making a special pose or something like that. And the more important a painting gets, the more effort a painter puts in here. Now, just think about the Mona Lisa. I know this is a photography channel, but I'm sure you have already heard from the most famous painting in the world. And I love this painting because of multiple reasons. It would go too far to mention them all in this video, so just quickly, the fact that Leonardo da Vinci studied the behavior of the muscles in your face when a human laughs is one of the reasons why this painting is so unique. Just quickly, does Mona Lisa laugh or not? Really quickly, it is also interesting for photographers. In the first step, we look at her eyes, because this is the most important visual weight in a portrait. So when we look into her eyes, she seems not to laugh, right? Because we are focused at the muscles around her eyes. And these muscles are painted in a way as she would not laugh. But when we look at her mouth, then, that's a usual behavior for the viewer, to oscillating the eyes between the eyes and the mouth in a portrait. And now when we look down at her mouth, she laughs, right? And this is given simply by the muscles around her mouth. They were painted in a way as she would laugh. It is an optical illusion and so decent, an absolute masterpiece. Now, what many people don't know is that Leonardo da Vinci studied the behavior of the muscles for many years just to find out how we can achieve exactly this effect of Mona Lisa. This was not a painting over the weekend, he worked for years on it. And Leonardo da Vinci drew so many sketches and studies about the human body during his years of training this effect. But however, I'm drifting away. So how can we use this knowledge for getting better photos? Well, I think we should go away a bit from these thoughts of just capturing reality, capturing what is already there. I think we can create much better images when we engage a bit more with our environment. Just to give you some examples. How does it look when water runs downstream? What happens when there is a stone inside the water? How does it look when the sun breaks through low-level clouds? And what if clouds are rising straight after the rain? And of course, we will see all of that as soon as we take a photograph of things like that. But it can help you massively when you know already about all that behavior already before you just think about taking a photograph, because it will simply increase your possibilities out in the field, your imagination. You will be faster in setup because you can better estimate what will happen with the weather, with the light in the next minutes or so. So when we break it down, when we know about the behavior of nature, it gets much easier to find compositions. And to get better on that point, the easiest way to achieve that is simply by engaging with nature as much as possible. I'm not talking about composition here, I'm talking about observing nature. And also here, this is really easy, but it doesn't come overnight. But it will definitely come, even automatically, with the time when you go out and go on observing. Well, before we will talk about why painters are masters in composition, let's talk about why they do so easy to get control over the emotions of the viewers. You know, whenever a painter sees a nice scene and he wants to paint it, it will automatically lead to a result that is more or less abstract. Yeah, it will always more or less be away from reality because it is painted. But when a photographer sees maybe even the same nice scene and he grabs his camera, the raw image he has captured will always look quite close to reality. Now, no one has a problem with the fact that a painting looks not 100% like reality. It is even what the viewers of a painting would expect. Basically, we can also shift colors in photography, we can crop in afterwards, we can dodge and burn areas in our image, and all the techniques we use all the time to get stronger results. To support the visual flow through an image, to get control over the emotions of the viewer, to engage the viewer, and so on. And things like that were done already by the old masters and well-known photographers like Ansel Adams, Joseph Sadek, and so on. I think Ansel Adams even said once that he spent more time in his darkroom than out on location. And it was never a problem for anyone back then. But especially in the last 20 years, something like that, there has developed a little group of photographers who handle the good old manipulation in photography as a kind of cheating. Viewers don't care about that, it's just a little group of photographers. And this is a quite weird, this has really a quite weird effect. I often see this in my workshops. I give one-to-ones for masters and advanced, but I have also often beginners there, and a lot of beginners are unsure about how far they can go in their editing without cheating. So what painters do is each painter has his own concept. The one works more with thicker brushes and indicates elements that are well known by the viewers so that they get anyway well recognized. Others use more thinner brushes and go much more in detail. There is no right or wrong in painting. I just think I would maybe avoid full frame. Don't use full frame brushes, quite difficult to paint details. Bad joke will be cut out this. However, the thing is, and this is what we should accept, there is also no right or wrong in photography. So painters don't have a problem with abstractness, and also photographers should not have a problem with that at all. It is your little world. You can do whatever you want. What I think is, it is good to have your own concept where you define by yourself how far you want to go. And I, for instance, I don't have a problem with removing smaller elements from a photo, but I would break my own concept if I would add elements, which were not there. but I anyway appreciate other artists who do exactly that. There is 100% tolerance from my side and also appreciation. Again, there is no right or wrong. And with having the freedom to do whatever you want, it is much easier to evoke emotions at the viewers. By the way, the backdrop of Mona Lisa was not really there in reality. Da Vinci added it. And also in Chalk Cliffs, Caspar David Friedrich added a tree and also people, I think, which were simply not there in reality. He saw the tree somewhere else and included it because it adds to his composition. What I can recommend is to engage with the art history concepts in photography. They are also based on painting, by the way, and this gives you a much better idea of how far you can go in your editing, also without over-editing. And I made already a video about that. I will link it up here for you. Well, painters have amazing imagination skills. They know how to simplify a scene. It is so easy to find compositions, but they are even masters in building up compositions and telling stories. Now, let's come back to the two girls, which I mentioned in the beginning of this video. They were painting for hours on one single painting. I like the composition, I like the mood they conveyed with their painting, and unfortunately I can't show it to you because of copyright reasons, but it was good. Now, the problem with photography is that it is so easy to expose. I mean, we just have to press the shutter release button on our camera, right? I mean, we also have to choose the right aperture, the right shutter speed, and we also have to think about where and how to focus and so on. But let's be honest, how long does us take this all? I mean, it depends on the experience of the photographer, of course, but I guess most of you will be finished with all that within a minute when you're dawdling. However, the problem is when we take a shot in digital photography and we are unhappy with it, we simply take another one. Painters can't do that, obviously. And this is why they tend to engage deeper with their scene and with their story they want to tell with their image. They think about the story when they're building up a composition. It's crazy, isn't it? By the way, I made already a video about storytelling and I will link it up here for you. Well, of course, in digital photography, we can take one more shot and one more and again and so on. And we can get even 20 different compositions on just one sunset. But what do you think? How high is the chance to get the composition which is that thoughtful, developed, like that one of a painter who engaged multiple hours with this composition? There are exceptions, of course. Sometimes we have to react quickly to light situations, and I got some really great photos by doing that. But the chance to get a strong masterpiece is not all too high in such a case. So what can we do to improve in composition? And it is so easy, and I mentioned it already in some of my videos. Just let your camera in your bag and engage deeply with the scene you want to photograph. Photographers have the big advantage against painters that we don't need multiple hours to execute, to expose. So what about using that saved time for working deeper on our compositions? Let's go to world class, my friends. And of course, you should also know about what to consider when it comes down to building up a composition. It is not all about the rule of thirds and holding the horizon straight. I even don't use rules like that. At the moment I'm working on something really big for you, by the way. It is all about the art history architecture of composition. So there will come something amazing in future. But meanwhile, if you want to improve your compositional skills, watch this video here. This will really help you. Now friends, I hope this video was useful for you. Give me a thumb up if you liked it, and don't forget to tune in next week. There will come a fantastic video as well. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.